All right, so welcome to our second discussion on lighting. Today we will be dealing with multiple lights. Everybody's favorite. Yay! So we're going to be doing a still life. You're going to have a choice between a single object or kind of a standard still life like bowl of fruit, candle, cup kind of thing. And you're also going to be doing a portrait. We have a character head scan that we got. Has full texture on it. It also has a subsurface scattering version of the Pixar surface material that we put on there. That is the only scene that you don't have to worry about assigning any Pixar surface or any materials to. Yes? No. This is a head scan, an actual 3D head scan and texture mapping from that scan. It does look creepy because the subject has their eyes closed. And the good thing about it is if you do not set your project correctly, the skin texture will be missing and it will look more like a corpse than it does. So that will tell you right away. If it looks white and pale and corpsey, you don't have your project set. It should at least have a little bit of color in the skin and head and the face on the lip. All right, so we have three things for you to download. We have the Project 3 SAL-C that contains the still life. You have a choice between two. We have a head scan project folder and then a separate template for the head scan because the head scan is a different aspect ratio than the other scene. It has its own template. So office hours next week will be Tuesdays, Thursdays. Tuesday will be 10 to 12, 2 to 4. Physical office hours, I'll be on Discord the whole time. Thursdays, 11 to 4, I'll be in my office and on Discord. And then we also have our Go to Training Open Lab from 1 to 5 on Thursday. I think Thursday's the 18th. So optional for campus and online students. All right, so today we're going to talk more about soft light. Light direction is going to be paramount because today, dealing with multiple lights, it's essential you get that first key light set up. That is your direction, that's your main shadow source. Light linking, today we will also work with the ability to have a light only affect a certain piece of geometry or group of geometry. So we can link and unlink lights from specific parts. The advantage to that is if you've got multiple lights in the scene, you're getting an unwanted effect on a backdrop or some other object from a light. In real world photography, they have to find a way to block that light. And all we have to do is just select the light and go, I don't want you to affect that chair over here. And we can do that. All right, we're also going to be doing quite a bit of image analysis too. So we can talk about light direction, using multiple lights and figure out how we can do that, what we can do that, how what we get may differ from the real world, which is always going to be crucial. Because most of the time you're going to get CG, or not CG, but you're going to get real photo reference, and you're going to have to figure out, okay, I know this is what's happening in the real world. I set my Maya scene up for that. I don't quite get those results. What do I have to do? And the object is, you do and go with what you know, configure your scene with lights, get everything. If it doesn't give you what you need, you have to add more to make it look like that. And it's only because we don't have the actual real world energy in Maya and RenderMan that we do in the real world. All right, questions? No. All right, so Let's talk about same actual light, but there is a difference. So, this was shot, I shot this the same time, same camera, same position, all the settings on the camera were the same. The only difference is what I did to the light. So this is what we would consider a standard photographic setup. There's camera, there's subject, we have light. Now, the light on the right is what we would call a hard light. You can see it's got a pretty detailed shadow edge. The one on the left, exactly same light, but look how soft the shadow is. What else do you notice about the image itself?
One's fuzzier, one's crisper.
Which one's crisper?
The hard light.
Yep. So, the difference between those two is, let me see if I can there we go, let's do that. So these are the lights I used. This isn't the exact setup, but these are exactly those same lights. The one that has a nice crisp edge is a spotlight that was on a stand in the same position. So that is direct light coming down. Now, the one on the left, same spotlight, but I put a hood on it, it's called a softbox. And that creates this big, giant surface of light. That big, giant surface of light diffuses that direct light, and it wraps around the subject a lot more. So what does that mean when you go to use it? Well, for one thing, since you don't have direct light rays as much, they are kind of random, hitting the subject, light gets in everywhere. So all this little kind of rough detail on the surface, we're missing all those fine little shadows that are created when you've got a direct light, like a spotlight or a flashlight on it. So depending on what your needs are, the same light can be made to be softer. And difference between hard light, soft light, size of the light, usually. Right? That big, giant softbox changes the size of the light from a small spotlight to a large surface, an area. That's why we used to call them area lights, because it takes up a shape, a size. So you get more detail because all these little fine areas in here now have a shadow. Depends on what you want to do. Like I said, if you're trying to sell a product and it's got detail on it, you want to show the detail, you're probably going to use a hard light. If you are photographing a person or something that you want to appear very soft and very evenly lit, you're probably going to use an area light or a softbox. Now, think of those proactive commercials. I'm sure you guys have all seen them. Can't miss them. Right? They show you before and after pictures. And usually the before pictures are people without makeup on. There's a hard, harsh light on them. It shows every pore, every nook and cranny on their faces. And then they show what happens afterwards. And it's usually like they are lit all over with big, giant, soft lights, and they have makeup all on. And they say, look at the difference our product made. Well, yeah, that and, $1,000 worth of lighting always helps. So it depends on what you want to do. For portraits, absolutely, you smooth stuff out. You wind up using soft boxes because it's very flattering to the skin. But if you want to show something that a lot of the documentary type photos where those photographers shoot stuff and they turn it black and white in really high contrast, that shows like wrinkles and lines. It's meant to tell a story. So there's a big difference between product sales and advertising and, for want of a better word, like photojournalism or storytelling. Depends on what you want your picture to tell the audience. Is it a story or is it advertising? Does that make sense? So we can do exactly the same thing in CG. It's all about our lights. Now, I probably could have gotten the same results if I had dragged all this stuff outside in the sun. But, again, when you're trying to shoot something and have consistent results, you need to be able to have predictability. So you need to be able to control things a little bit. Shooting outside is great, natural light, I'm a big fan of it. But if you're trying to shoot consistently or you have to do things over and over again, light outside changes, sun goes behind the clouds, time of day has a big deal, is a big deal also. Alright, so soft lighting in cinema. Most of the time we use this when we don't want it to draw attention to itself. Think of film noir, how dramatic that is. Usually, well, it's usually black and white. That's dramatic to begin with. And then it also has these pools of light. There are lots of shadowy areas. Soft lighting, usually everything is pretty well lit. Lots of gradients, and the subject is usually the story, the dialogue. That's usually focused. Not the lighting. So, like I said up here, probably the best way to describe it is gradient. There's a nice even gradient between dark and light. Whereas film noir is dark. There's hard, contrasty areas between the shadow and the light. And that's the style. Now in CG, without that control, we would not be able to make believable looking scenes, stories, animations. We have to be able to create something that people can relate to. All right, so we have a couple of resources for you guys. The first one is the lighting compass. There's a link inside lesson 3. This will take you right to the Lighting for Digital Photography book. Good book, recommend reading it, but if not, at least download the compass out of the book. Because all you have to do in Safari Books is just right-click, save image. You can pretty much copy anything you want in there. Seems really simplistic, but this will help you when you try to figure things out. Now, as I mentioned last time, everything is about the relationship between the subject and the camera. Right? That relationship never changes. The camera is always going to be aimed at the subject. If it weren't, you wouldn't record it, you wouldn't know, people wouldn't know what you're trying to show them or tell them. After that, it's where you place the lights. And where you place the lights is always going to be based on where they are to the subject and the camera. All right, so when you guys did front light, where would the light be?
Up top of the camera.
All right, so basically they call it on camera, more or less where it is. It doesn't have to be exactly on camera, but it could be anywhere up, down, left, right of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it usually will be 45 degrees left or 45 degrees right, because it's next to the camera, so it's in front of the subject.
Well, yes and no, because remember, the subject and the camera's going to be aimed at the subject, subject's going to be looking at the camera, usually. You know, it doesn't matter whether it's a still life or a person. It's going to be framed up so it's visible. Pure front light will send your shadows where? Back. Toward the camera or away from the camera?
Away from the camera.
Yep, away from the camera. Sometimes you don't even see the shadows because they are behind the subject. And that is a true front light. Now, what you're describing, the 45-degree left, 45-degree right, that sometimes it's called three-quarter light, where you get some part of the subject in light and some in shadow. Kind of creates volume, a little bit of depth in there. But this is a very common area to be when you're doing key lights. 45 left, 45 right. And 45 left, 45 right, it could be anywhere from like 20 degrees to 60 degrees. Depending on what you need. Side light, it's going to be 90 degrees. You guys who did the backlight for the sphere? All right, so where would that light be on this compass? Yep, 180, somewhere around there. Exactly. Now, this also helps you when you have multiple lights. So you figure out, okay, want my key light, I want to put it 45 degrees left. That's going to illuminate my subject. So, based on how much of, the light pattern can reach around to the subject, this part of the subject is going to be brightest. Now, this part is probably going to have some shadow. There's too much shadow, you probably want to add a fill light. Yeah, something to pick up where the key light can't get, but not enough so that it becomes confused with another key light. Unless there's a photographic technique for that, but that's different. So we would probably put it somewhere here, the opposite end. So if our key light's 45 left, our fill's probably somewhere 45 right.
And then you would put, what's it called, a rim? Like 135 right?
Maybe, yeah. Depends on which part of the subject kind of blends into the background.
Yeah.
Because that's really what you're trying to do. That's exactly right. So it could actually be anywhere here depending on what the needs of the shot are.
Okay.
For instance, if you want to keep a lot of the light on one side, you might actually have the rim on the same side as the key.
I see.
But it's going to be stylistic. It's probably going to be dictated by what your parameters are that you're given. But yeah, that's exactly what you would do. Good. Good. Any questions?
No.
So again, it seems you can draw this if you want rather than download it. Sometimes it sticks a little better. But just kind of think about this if you are stuck or, you feel like you're forgetting something. Remember, it's always about this relationship. Camera, subject could be anything, and then where the light's placed in relationship to those two. Even if you're trying to stage a shot outside, your light is probably the sun. Or maybe it's an overhead light from a porch or, a light out in the parking lot or something. Could be anything. All right, the other resource is this. This is what we are going to be using for the portrait, and there is your dead person, right here. Now, that person was alive when they scanned it. It wasn't like they went in, got a cadaver in the morgue and just scanned it in. No. All right. This lighting guide is from Digital Camera World. I can't provide that to you directly, but I give you the link that you can go there and download it. And you will need to download that because you are going to choose one of these portrait styles that uses multiple lights and try to recreate it using our figure, our character. Now, like I said, the character's already got texture on it. It's got a subsurface scattering material which allows light to kind of bleed through the ear. It behaves a lot like human. This is by no means going to fool anybody. That still is pretty CG and took a lot of time just to get to that level. But people make careers out of skin textures. And textures, I mean materials also. So painting skin textures is a whole art also. And then getting the material to respond to the light is another whole art form. So between the two, getting photorealistic looking people where they interact with the light in a believable manner takes a lot. Usually it's a team of people trying to do it. All right, so we're going to talk about this, so I suggest you download it. We're going to kind of go through these because if you understand these lighting styles, that will also help you with the still life too. Because the still life is exactly the same thing, except instead of a human, it's going to be, you know, a statue, or it's going to be a small still life laid out. All right, so let's take a look here. So there's your lighting compass. Down here under resources, if you click the free lighting portrait poster, seems kind of unremarkable. So save as, I'm going to throw it on my desktop. It is a JPEG. Don't underestimate it though, because when you open it up, it'll open up in the Mac Preview program, and if you look at it actual size, you'll see it is a gigantic poster. Right, now, the great thing about, now this kind of guide you can find all over the internet, because there are photographers who are happy to share how they do stuff. And what they will do is usually give you exactly what's here. They'll show you where they placed the light, how many lights they had. They'll usually, sometimes they'll tell you the kind of equipment they use, the exposure, the f-stop, the time that the shutter was open, the color balance of the film, the light, you know, color they used. They will go into detail to show you how they did it. And when you first start learning the light, it's an excellent resource to be able to use somebody else's tutorials like that. All right, now, a couple things that we want to define for us in CG are at the bottom, the legend. So the first one, camera, that's our Maya camera. Now, for a portrait, you're probably not ever going to use a 35mm lens. 35mm lens means it is a wide angle. What will happen is you'll get a little bit of distortion on the edges, and you don't want to do that to a face. The whole idea is to keep the face proportionate. So what we wind up doing is we wind up using somewhere between 50, 55mm. I usually recommend just keep the camera at 50. You can't go wrong with a 50mm portrait lens. There are certain lenses that you can buy that are fixed, that photographers use all the time. 24mm, 35mm for wide angle. When you get into portrait, it's like 50mm, maybe 52, 55. Then you get into the longer lenses, it's like 70 millimeter, 100 millimeter, maybe 150, 200, they get much bigger. Depending on the photographer, the amount of money they have, lenses are expensive. A lot of times when you buy a lens kit or a camera kit, you buy a variable lens. That's, you can afford that as opposed to, kicking out $1,200 for each lens. But depends on if it's your livelihood, then yeah. It's like you guys buying a laptop or having Maya or Photoshop. It is a tool that you have to have.
Investment.
Exactly, it is an investment. And if you take care of those lenses, they will last a lifetime. All right, so camera, subject. Pretty simple, pretty standard. No explanation there. Gray background, usually a seamless background. Kind of like what we had for the disc light example. Just a curved background. Just kind of meant to minimize shadows or to have the shadows gradient away from the subject. So the first three, that's pretty simple. Gray background, we got that covered. Right, the next set of lights, these 4 lights are all based off of this. This, when you see a strobe with a reflector, that is a spotlight. Now, what's the difference between a spotlight and a strobe? Anybody know? Yeah.
A strobe is flashing? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, as the name implies, yep, that's exactly a good guess. It's basically meant to flash when the shutter goes off. It's timed with the shutter, so it's only on for the length of time the camera shutter is open, allowing the light in. Now, the reason they do that is because, as opposed to going into like a TV set or a film set where they have those big giant lights on stands, those lights are on all the time. High power, lots of heat, melts your subject. So most of the time for small studios, they will use a strobe, which you can generally use with a battery pack. Low power, low drain, quick results, repeatable most of the time. I mean, again, a piece of equipment, a good one, it's going to cost money. But, for it to go off and have the light be exactly the same color every time it goes off, to be the same wattage, that makes a big deal. It's a lot different than our consumer light bulbs where you flip it on and you can see them go dimmer or, they get brighter depending on age and voltage. Yeah.
Okay, so essentially, like just the camera flash is a strobe.
Yeah.
Technically.
Technically, yep. Even
it's not
when
always on. It's just turns on when you press the button.
exactly.
Okay.
Now that's first off, you have to have it wired to your camera.
Yes,
the
of
camera
course.
has to trigger it basically.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like you clicking the mouse button.
Okay.
So another thing with that is, oh yeah, I know where I was going with this. So this is all based off of this light right here, which for us would be what kind of light?
Key.
Well, key light,
Yeah.
but like you had to make a light to mimic that effect, what would it be? Don't think strobe, just think light itself.
This one?
This light turned into a spotlight because it has a cone. This behaves exactly like a stage spotlight.
Yeah.
So when you see this, even though it says strobe with reflector,
Mhm.
it's a spotlight. Because it's got a cone, it's going to fan the light out. It's going to reflect, I mean, this is like a flashlight too.
Yeah.
Flashlights have reflectors. Car headlights have reflectors inside where the bulb
I
is.
see what you're saying
So it's all meant to take that energy and send it out.
now. Okay. I see what you're saying.
Makes sense.
Reflect on.
So think spotlight.
Yes.
Here, strobe with a honeycomb.
Refuse. With that Is that what the honeycomb is, to diffuse it?
Yeah, it's to
Make it less
diffuse it, but not a lot.
Okay.
Just a little bit. You want to diffuse it a lot, you put this in front of it.
Oh, okay.
So what this does is it just breaks it up a little bit. So the light's not quite as harsh. For us, the equivalent would probably be something along the lines of making the light slightly bigger.
Hmm.
And that would make the shadows slightly softer. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Oh, that's good. Photo bond with pictures. If did you download this?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Because all this stuff is at the bottom.
Okay. For sure, sir.
All right. So strobe with a honeycomb, it's still a spotlight, but they have something in front of it. Now, sometimes in photography, they will put things in front of the light to make it have a shape in it. Sometimes they call them either cookies or gobos. It's basically a shape they stick in front of the light and it creates a pattern.
Okay.
Like a lot of times, if you want to create, you're in a studio or you're in a sound stage, you want to make it look like there's trees outside a window. Well, you take a light and you hang some branches in front of the light so it casts a shadow.
Yes.
So what this does is this kind of pattern here is just enough to soften the light just a little. All right, the next one, strobe with the snoot. Sounds like South Park. What do you think this is doing besides giving you something that looks like, I don't know, a Devo hat? If anybody's familiar with the band Devo from the 70s or 80s?
Isn't it just like, bring it to a point?
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. You are basically taking a wider area light and making it smaller. Now, we can do that by doing what with our spotlight, this light?
Bring the cone.
Yep, tighten the cone angle up, make it smaller. We can focus that light.
Make a laser.
Pretty much, yeah. That's exactly what you can do. But with this, what they want to do is try to minimize the areas that it hits the subject. This is probably what they're going to use for a rim more than that. This is going to spread the light out a little too much. This will kind of focus it, give you that nice hard light beam. So, first three, it's basically theme and variations on a spotlight. They all have their job to do. They all do things slightly different. And for us in CG, it's no big deal. For one thing, we use the same light. We don't have to worry about paying a power bill, having our battery go out. We can leave it on all the time. And the camera doesn't care because we're not really running anything. And the subject is not going to complain because they're CG. All right, so next. We're still on our direct light phase here, by the way. So next, we have strobe with a softbox. That is basically a hood that you put in front of the spotlight that diffuses it. This is used all the time whenever they do any kind of glass commercial or nobody reads magazines anymore, but whenever you see a still image. Cars, they use soft boxes. A lot of times they will have big giant rings of light above the car. They have it right overhead of the car, and that way that shape hits the car and it changes with the lines of the car. A lot of times photographers will throw up like parachute type material, throw some bright spotlights behind it, just to get shapes in there so you can break up portions of your subject. But this big giant shape softens the light and makes a big area. So this is the softest of these here.
You said it covers the more of the area, right?
Yes, it does. So you're basically taking this and you're making it about 8 to 10 times bigger. And this material will diffuse the light as it goes through. It's designed to scatter it. So it's soft. That means it comes from different angles. All right, questions? All right, so now we get into the reflectors. A lot of times they will use reflectors in place of a fill light. Not all the time, but sometimes. They may also use a reflector along with a fill light and a key light and a backlight, depending on what they need to do. So reflector is going to give us what kind of light?
That's,
Very soft light.
Soft, what did you say?
I said this, because it's not reflective light, I think, because usually reflectors are
Yep, circular, they can be rectangular, square also. Depends on what the surface is. Any surface could really work like this. Could probably work pretty good. Put a bright enough light on it. Trouble is, this is a little too reflective. You can probably see the shape in there. But we would have to shine the light here and then take a picture of you. So this is going to be direct or indirect? Indirect, yep, because we are reflecting light from another source. So right away, it's going to lose some energy, so it's not going to be as bright, but it's also going to help scatter the light a little bit more. Even with this silver reflector, it's still going to be kind of rough enough to scatter the light. So silver reflector, of the three here, this is probably the smoothest. This will give you probably more energy, more focused light into your scene. All right, shoot through Brawley. This allows light to go through and to reflect back. Now, every month I do this, and you would think I would learn. I actually have a picture of it next lecture, and I can't remember why I never include it here. Well, I know I include it next lecture because we're talking about environment light. So let's see. There we go. This is a shoot through Brawley. Strobe. All right. Where is the bulk of the energy? Through or reflected behind?
reflective.
Yeah. So you're going to get a little more energy on the reflection than you will going through. But, I mean, that's not bad, considering. So with this light, this can be used in either direction, depending on what your needs are. Depending on the throw pattern you want. If you take a look here, the shape of this is, spherical. And it is convex here, or concave. So it's going to throw the light around like that. Whereas this is just going to kind of send the light in the pattern here, but it's going to be a little bit weaker than over here. But the point is, you can use it in either direction, depending on what your needs are. All right. So, silver Brawley, this is one direction. It is designed with a black back coating, not designed to allow light through. So this is going to be pure reflection. All right, so we already determined, well, maybe we didn't. So we already talked about what kind of light we would use with the strobe, right? We said disc light. How about softbox?
Rectangle?
Yeah, rectangle light, depending on the shape of it. Rectangle light. How about the reflector?
I'm thinking disc light.
Yeah, probably disc light. I mean, based on the shape, there are square reflectors, so whatever light, disc light or a rectangle light would work. Does it matter which one? No, as long as it gives you the result that you're after. All right, how about the shoot-through brolly? What would you do for that?
Like this converted into a spotlight? No, not a spotlight. Maybe just a disc light.
Okay, that's a good thought. Could be a sphere. I mean, because of this hooded pattern here. But go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking about the cone feature.
Okay.
You know, like they can make it smaller, they can make it bigger.
Spotlight, yep, that's possible. And what can you do to the edges of the cone to soften it?
Yeah, so
Cone soften or?
Cone softness, yeah.
What's the, just off the ball question, there's soften, but then what's the emission? What's the
It's called emission focus.
Is that essentially the same thing? What different?
No, because the softness deals just with the edges of the cone.
Okay.
Emission focus deals with the intensity of the light within the cone.
Oh, okay.
By default, without emission focus turned on, you should have relatively even intensity throughout the whole throw pattern of the cone.
Mm-hmm.
When you turn emission focus on, it's going to keep the center focus bright, but towards the edges, depending on how high you turn it up, it's going to fall off or fade to the edges.
Okay.
Like car headlights, like flashlight does. Where the bulb is always going to be the hottest part. All right, so shoot through brolly. We could try that. So let's. Oh, I turned it off again. So the difference, though, with this is, look at the area on the side of the shoot-through brolly. Part of the problem with using the sphere light is the sphere light's going to be completely even there. Now, if you're trying to use this because it has that kind of dark area in the middle, like you might have it set to be maybe fill light, maybe key light, and then you're using it as a backlight somewhere. So how would we get that effect if we had to shoot something like this? Yeah?
Do you mean like two different lights? Because you could do a disc light and then a spotlight.
Okay. There's a possibility, absolutely. Why not? Which side would you use the disc for?
You would use the disc on the left side and the cone spotlight on the right side.
Okay. That would probably work. You could try it. That's a good thought because we've got an area that looks a little bit like a very soft cone edge here. A little bit of dark area, and then over here, it's kind of very soft. Anything else we could use? So yes, that would definitely be a possibility. That would be in your list of things to try. Breaking it up into two lights is a great way to get around this. Plus, you have control. with a single light, it's going to broadcast the same intensity. If you use a sphere light, it's going to broadcast the same intensity for the whole area. This way you can make one side brighter, the other side a little dimmer. All right, so what else could you do? Let's not stop there. There's other possibilities, other combinations that might work.
What are we trying to achieve? The middle?
This look.
Mm.
Right now, this is easy because we don't have a subject to worry about.
Mhm.
This is purely how a light is behaving naturally in the real world. But this is the kind of stuff you have to solve with a subject in it. So it's easy to talk about it now without the subject.
You could make the reflector a mesh light and still use.
Well, we're not on mesh lights yet. Hold that though for later. And there are some limitations with mesh lights. Knowing or using the tools that we have available now with our basic light set. Which light can we eliminate? So who said sphere? Why?
Because you said it's equal all around.
Okay.
Mm.
Could we though eliminate it totally? Or would we have to? So here in this area, you might be able to use a sphere to get this. You know, it would be based on the size of the sphere, how bright it is. But a sphere is going to be like a bare light bulb. It's only going to throw light so far. So possibly we could do a sphere here and then something else on this side. So you don't discount any light, actually. The only one you can really throw out for this exercise would be the distant light. That's the sun. Parallel light rays, big giant wall of light, pretty unwieldy. Can't really control it here in a small environment. And that's not a small environment light. That is a big environment light. So basically, anything that's going to give you the job could work. You could use two disc lights. You could use a disc light and a rectangle light. You could use a sphere light, a disc light, a sphere light, a rectangle light. You could use 3 lights if you have to. It doesn't really matter. What really matters is what the look is you achieve. Now, we may use, for example, we may use a spotlight here. We may use a disc light here, but then find, there's some areas that aren't illuminated enough. That is where the art comes in. That's where you have to kind of figure out, okay, I need to add more light. What light can I use that's going to help me get that effect? Anybody here ever watch Mythbusters? Mythbusters, they test urban myths or legends for accuracy. Could it actually happen in the real world? And if they try to recreate that myth or legend based on the information they have and they can't do it, then they figure out what would we have to do to recreate it. And basically, you guys are light busters. Because you look at this and go, okay, I know what this is doing in the real world. I set my lights up. If I don't get that result, what do I have to do to get that result? Well, you're going to have to add more light. Maybe another light, maybe 2 lights. That makes sense. Question? All right, so I'll close this again, and I'll regret it, I'm sure. All right. So now let's talk about the styles that you get with these lights. All right, you will see that a lot of portrait styles are based off of Rembrandt. Rembrandt was a painter, but he was also a lighting artist. He had a really good sense of light. There are a lot of paintings of his that portrait artists have copied because the style is pleasing and flattering to the subject. And they are able to recreate them. I mean, Rembrandt could make Dutch businessmen look interesting. And that says a lot for the period. So, this Rembrandt with a soft box. It's basically light, single light source coming from a direction, and it's framed such that both eyes are visible. They're not in shadow. Right side of the face in this case is in shadow, but not complete shadow. Right? It's all about the shapes that you have here, the positive, negative spaces. You guys talk about that in art, right? And this is really where this kind of lighting comes in. What causes those positive and negative spaces on the face?
The light along with the shading.
Okay. Anything else? Yes, you're right. What else?
I'm trying to figure it out.
The contrast of value.
Contrast value? Direction of the light, absolutely. So when you look at this, what is causing the shadow? The light. What else?
The angle.
The angle.
What's causing the shadow?
Yeah.
It's the actual nose, the lips, and stuff like that.
There you go.
The valleys, like the.
Yup. Landmarks, if you will.
Yeah.
On the subject. The human face, we've come over the years to kind of take this all in as a whole. But when you start to look at just the shapes that are caused by it, you find that painters and portrait photographers take great care to place those shadows in the right spot. Now, if you shoot this too low, the nose shadow goes up into the eyes. You shoot it too high, the nose shadow comes down. So where is the nose shadow?
So
Like down right.
Yeah, it's slightly above on her right side, our left. And you can see there's a little highlight there. And you can tell by the direction of the shadow here. So it's down a little bit, but not enough to occlude the lips.
That's why the chin has a little bit, under the chin is covered.
Yep,
Is shadow.
right there. That's from the lips. And this is kind of where the light falls off here. This is really where the light falls off. This is shadow being cast by the brow, the nose, the lips. The head, if you will, casts that shadow. Now, notice the shadows. What quality do they have?
Soft.
They're soft. That's because of this, softbox. So the way the light is aimed at the subject, the way the subject has, and the subject is not looking straight on at the camera, right? It's slightly off with the head turned. That is a standard kind of Rembrandt pose. You will see portrait photographers, you go and get your school picture taken, they'll go, okay, turn a little bit to the side now, look at me, here's squeaky toy. All right, good. So, keep all that in mind when you start to try to figure out light and shadow. Don't take for granted the stuff that we're used to seeing, like, oh, it's a face. It looks like a face. What makes it look like a face? And that's where you really have to drill on what's causing all the shadows. What makes us recognize a face from a flat sphere? All right, so here we've got to shoot through Brawley. We're not using backside of the light much. We're using kind of that soft light that goes through. Now, what's the difference in the quality between the two?
The shoot through, it
Same.
spreads out the light.
Yeah, it looks like the light is in identical position. Subject is more or less in the same position. So what makes, yeah,
Yeah, I was thinking that the left has a much warmer color in this lighting
Okay.
than on the right.
okay. What makes it look like it has a warmer color?
Because when you look at the pale silver skin,
Yep.
it looks
Paleness of the
red,
skin.
it's more warm.
Also, take a look. The backdrop is slightly brighter than the previous.
So it's more pointed towards the back, the left.
Well, it makes me think that, and you can see the highlight in the eye is almost identical.
Yeah.
It just that this looks like it's kind of throwing light a little more around the subject, not just on the subject itself.
Because you can see more of her, the right side of her, the right features of her face.
Yeah.
Because it's going out more. It's bouncing off. It's bouncing off more. So it's there's indirect light shooting at her right side of her face.
Yeah.
Because of
Yeah.
They're probably using a reflector on the left picture or something?
No, there's no reflector because they would have marked
No,
that
on the
in.
left. Well, I don't know.
Over here?
Yeah.
No, that's the one we just did. That is just the softbox. Yes.
I believe the shadows on the right picture, they're a little less. It's a little less darker than the one on the
Yep.
left.
Yep. Yep. Definitely. We're getting a little more light around there, as everybody mentioned. It kind of wraps around the subject just a little bit more. It's got a slightly different look to it. Okay, same shot. This time, same position. Subject is more or less in the same spot, but we've got spotlight with honeycomb on it, which diffuses the light a little bit. You can see the edges are not razor sharp, but they are very dark and defined. So you can still see it's a hard light source, but that honeycomb kind of softens those edges just a little bit. Much more in style with film noir, where you've got light and dark and light and dark. You've got the same positive, negative spaces, but take a look, the nose really just blends right in with the whole right side of the head. Now, if you're looking at yours on your, well, I don't know if it's any better in Go to Training, but there is a little bit of light hitting the backdrop on the right side. I don't know if it's coming through, but if you pull this up, you should be able to see it on yours. Little bit of light, so while on the projector it looks like this whole right side of her head blends in, there's a little bit of light here that kind of gives a very faint shape to the form. Not completely gone. Again, light in more or less the same position. You can tell more focused highlight in the eye also. Same position. Same direction. All right. Last one is more or less the same, but we're using a,
Ball.
yeah, it's a silver brolly, so it doesn't have any back that's open.
So that allows the light to wrap around.
Yep,
What I
a little
see.
bit more. Not quite as much as the shoot through.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, no, go.
It just says definitely wrapping around because there's way less shadow on the other pictures.
Yep, absolutely. So you can see this is basically reflecting the light from the strobe, bigger throw pattern. So we get more light in the background, a little bit softer light here. Notice the shadow from the nose is still, pointing down just a little bit, but not all that much. All right, so same subject, same camera angle, light in the same position, but the light's been altered itself, and you get completely different looks. All right, so Rembrandt short, it's kind of the same thing as the other shot. The only difference is this is what we would normally call an over-the-shoulder shot, where the subject is turned more, the head's turned more to look at the camera. We get the left side of the face, the subject's right side, but we get a broader area of shadow. The light almost looks like it's in the same position.
Yes, yeah, the light looks like it's between the 90 degrees left and 45 degrees left.
Yep.
Rotation.
Yep, that's good observation. Now the others, they look like they were almost right on the 45. This one looks like it's more like 60, closer to that 90, absolutely. All right, so Rembrandt short, Rembrandt broad. It's basically sort of the same over-the-shoulder shot. Broad side of the head is basically what it means. Broad side of the head is more illuminated, light's coming from the opposite side. Soft light, soft box. Slightly different look. Now, where is the light placed height-wise?
Low.
Height. I think it's high.
Why?
Because when you look at the shadow, the nose is pointing down.
Yep, great. Good observation.
You can see the reflection.
Right there. And you can see a little tiny glimmer of reflection in the eye too, which helps.
You can also-
So yeah, you're absolutely right. What were you going to say?
You can see the reflection on her forehead as well.
Yep, like right about there, right? Yep. Good observation. All right, so this one, split, is what kind of light? Side light, absolutely. That is like 90-degree side light. Now notice, the thing that makes this work is that light also illuminates the backdrop. So while we lose almost half of the face, we pick up the silhouette on the other side, so we have a decent shot. And the thing that makes it interesting too is it's not completely divided right up the center of the head. It kind of trails off a little bit at the top. That kind of relieves that whole kind of split personality thing. And again, it's all about shapes. Think of these as shapes and how they work compositionally. You know, the fact that it's a human with nose and lips and ears and head and everything, that makes it interesting because you get weird shapes. All right, so the next one is exactly the same thing, but look the difference with a fill. They're calling it a fill light, and it's really what? Yeah, it's a silver reflector. So it is not giving as much energy as the key light, but it's a different kind of light.
Fill light.
Yeah. Fill light, and it's a little bit softer. Like you can see where this light is, even though that's a soft box, you can still see it's got some energy here, whereas this is all bounce energy. That's a whole lot more even. That looks like a Proactive commercial. All right, make sense?
Yes.
All right, so over the shoulder, broad side of the head is pretty much in shadow. Now, if you look on your version, you can see there's a little bit of light getting around to the backdrop behind the head here. But bulk of the light, and the light, by the way, is aimed more at the subject than the wall. So you're not seeing much here. So putting this shape, that silhouettes nicely. How about height-wise?
It's a little higher up.
Okay, why?
Mainly because it looks like there's just, her face is brighter. Maybe
Okay.
that side of it,
How high up would you say?
obviously. Like head level.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree. For one thing that gives it away is that little highlight in her eye is like almost in the center. Maybe up just a little bit enough so we get the light to fall off up there. But yeah, good observation.
It doesn't look like she has any shadows under her brow.
What's that?
Doesn't look like she has a shadow under her eyebrow.
Yeah. Right. Talking about here?
Other side.
Oh, other side, yeah.
If we're higher up, it looked like there would be a bit of a shadow.
You'd have more if we're higher up, yeah. What you were going to say?
I was just gonna say that the shadow on the forehead goes a little more farther than the rest. Yeah.
Yep.
But the neck as well.
Yep. Over here?
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. All right, so split broad. It's pretty much flipping it around the other side. We are dealing primarily with almost side light, but not quite. Got light that hits the backdrop, defines the head, the nose, that shape of the nose with the bridge of the nose, the way it kind of valleys up a little bit, looks like a ski slope under there. That's, that's all intentional, the way the head is turned. All right, so the light here, same light, they move it around to like 45 degrees, shove it closer to the subject. Big light on the subject now. So now it's wrapping around the subject a little more. Softer shadows. Height-wise,
I think it's like right there.
yeah, just maybe a little bit up there because we got a little bit of shadow under that nose, but not much.
The intensity looks way higher.
Yeah, well, that's also because the light's closer.
Oh.
So when you shove the light closer, not only is it bigger, but it's going to be a little brighter also. But I'll notice you shove it closer, the backdrop got darker. Because now the subject is in the way of that light hitting the backdrop, whereas when it was pulled back further away from the subject, more light could go around the subject. Right. Same light pulled back. Get the same shadow almost, but notice that now the backdrop is lit a little better. Shadow's going to be a little bit longer on the nose because the light's further away. Shadow edges a little bit harder. All right, so a loop, subject looking at the camera directly. It's almost like a full front shot with the subject. Light's almost in the same position. How high up is it?
Way up high.
Yeah, it looks much higher than the other one. Not high enough, though, to cause a super long shadow on the nose, but enough to get a shadow here. Got shadow here, or here in the bridge, and on the side. All right. Butterfly. Where's the light at?
Right above the camera.
Above the camera?
You know, in front of the camera, but like way higher.
Yeah, higher up at the subject. So single light, brighter up here, not enough where the brows overshadow the eyes like The Godfather, but enough so you can tell this is brighter and it's not quite as bright down here. Notice you also get that nice little gradient in the back behind the subject. Now for us, this is a good example. For us, we may not be able to get that with one light. So this might be where something like light linking would come in. Because we may find we get really nice light on the subject, but the backdrop is either too dark, too bright, or I don't get that nice gradient. So what do? I unlink my key light from the backdrop, create a separate light, throw it behind the subject. I got total control over where it is and how bright it is and what kind of light it is, and I can basically mimic that effect. So and this is something that you want to start to think about now is, all right, if I can't get that effect with a single light, how do I create it? The best way, break the connection with the backdrop for the key light or whatever light's causing you an issue, and get a separate light to control it. All right, so here, flat light, 2 key lights, 45 degrees from each other. That is your proactive commercial right there. Now, a lot of times, though, proactive, they may have a light above, a light below. I mean, the whole idea is to smooth out that skin so you really can't see anything. That softens it sufficiently, it's hard to tell, where the pores are in it. All right, so as far as height goes, where is the light?
It's very hard to tell.
Like how high up?
It's not that high, because I can still see some of the neck.
Yep. Exactly. Not that high. It looks like it's probably a little bit higher, maybe up there, but based on the highlights also, it's got to be pretty level with the head. And also, I mean, we can make that light level, and those lights are 20 inches, so it's almost a 2-foot square. So that takes up quite a bit of real estate.
You'll be able to tell by the shadow surrounding her shirt.
Here?
Yes.
Possibly. I usually go with like shadow under the nose, under the brows, under the lip, under the chin. So the fact that we're getting light under the chin, under the nose, means the light's not that high up. And at least part of it is extending down around the subject. It also looks like this might be a little bit brighter than higher up or even lower. So light's going to be somewhere in this area, just based on where it hits the background too. And these are all things that you guys can catalog and kind of go down a checklist like, where's my light? All right, so that one's pretty easy. For this one, 2 key lights, whatever you do to one light, you do to the other. You mimic them. They got the same intensity. They're more or less going to be in the same position. Now when we get into this, everybody loves this, the Badger. Very Wolverine-y looking. So it is pretty much the same flat light, but flipped around behind the subject. Not really behind totally, kind of on the sides. And the whole idea with, anybody's ever seen a picture of a badger, they always have that patch of fur in their forehead that's always lighter, creates that kind of V shape. You're getting that shadow shape there. And that's kind of a signature look for it. Now, for us in CG, two similar flat lights. For us in CG, position them where you see them based on this, but then we may have to bring them around more to the front than you would think to be able to get light to come around to the front and give us that shape. So remember, don't get stuck on, hey, my lights are in the right position. Why does my scene look like that? Well, we probably got to bring them around because we're dealing with CG lights. We're not getting that same energy pattern that we do in the real world. So this is a very popular one for students to pick. I don't know why everybody loves the badger. I guess because it's sort of dramatic looking.
Looks awesome.
All right, height-wise, where are those lights?
They're kind of like at the top temples of your head, but just a little bit higher.
Okay,
Pointing towards the front of your face
okay.
at the angle,
How about height? How high up are they?
just above your head.
Above her head? Probably not much above her head. If you take a look at the highlights on her eyes, they're almost like right in the center of the pupils here. But again, it's a big light, so it's probably covering an area like this. And that's why the top of the head, the bottom of the body, that's pretty evenly lit, except for the shadow in the front. Right, now, any of these images that have two visible lights are acceptable for you to choose as your portrait style, because you're going to choose one of these. Now, if you see a single light you like, and you say, well, I can just break the light and do a separate light for the background, that doesn't count. It's got to be two visible lights that are here. You can do, as many lights as you need, but it has to have at least two visible. So once we get around here to the flat light, everything there on kind of you can use. The only one you can use earlier is that one, because that is truly double light setup. It's got a fill light. Even though it's a reflector, that still counts. All right. So where are we? We did the badger. Clamshell. Basically, kind of like this. Just the reason they call clamshell is if you've ever seen a clamshell open, they kind of open a little wider than 90 degrees, and that's about what they do. Light above, light below the subject. I'll bet the light on the top is pretty close to the same position for the flat light we saw, or the one top light that they had in front of the subject. Now, again, anytime you've got, this is like two key lights almost, so anytime you have that, you have a very flat looking subject. Not much change in the shadow. Right, now, here, this is a more traditional kind of shot that you're used to seeing. So key light, backlight. And a true backlight, not a light made into a rim. Right, so 45 left, little bit high. Take a look at the shadow on the nose. The nice part is, key light separate from the backlight. That's kind of an easy one. Not easy, but it's one of the simpler ones to do if you're first starting out and you're totally confused. Because all you have to do is worry about getting that key light, ignore the backdrop completely because you're going to be putting a separate light back there. In fact, you may wind up unlinking this light from the backdrop anyway because it may be causing this backdrop to be too bright. Because remember, lighting's additive as soon as you start to add more than one light. This light plus this light together is going to make that backdrop. Where in CG we can go, whoa, too bright or way too dark. Well, I can just break the connection, put my separate light there, total control over it. So where is the backlight?
A little below person.
Yep, why?
You can see the highlight, the brightest part, the highlights are right above her shoulder.
Yep, right around in here. So that would be a real good call. And again, it's that nice soft gradient that you have. So, right around here, a lot of people in the beginning go with what they think where the light should be, which they usually try and stick it right behind the subject. But, take a look, it's right around in here. That's probably where it's going to sit. Nice thing is, when you're doing an IPR render, you can nudge the light over a little and watch it redraw as you're working. All right, next shot, exactly the same thing, but this light is flipped around and used as a rim. So, key light, almost identical. In fact, it should be really identical. Backdrop, a little bit darker. Where is the rim light?
About mid-ear.
Okay. Positionally in the head, behind the head, where?
Behind your neck.
Where?
Behind your neck.
Which side?
Our right or left.
Yeah, over here. Yep. Don't believe everything you see. Because if you make your light like this, in CG, we stick it right behind your head, you might not see any rim at all, anywhere. So we kind of got to bring it over here so we get that rim. And again, this is where subsurface scattering in your CG material comes into play. Without that, this looks totally artificial. I mean, it's CG, it's going to look artificial anyway, but it looks worse. Right, the whole idea of that light is to just catch the edge. Now, when it hits the hair, it's going to spread a little more just because hair picks up highlights, the oils in the hair, the color of the hair, whatever. All right, does that make sense? All right, so this next high key shot is pretty much this one, loop with a background, but it also has a reflector. Anytime you see the word high key, that means very little shadow. Everything is evenly lit. She looks like a polar bear in a snowstorm. Because she's fair-skinned to begin with, light hair. That's pretty quirky looking. But that is stylistic of a high key. Do you ever watch, guys probably don't do this, watch much TV, but like 1960s, early 1960s sitcoms like I Love Lucy or Dick Van Dyke Show or any kind of those old-timey shows, everything was high key, especially in the bedroom. And they always had two separate beds because in those days you couldn't have people in the same bed together. But everything was high key. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to bed, good night. It would turn off lights and it would still be like super bright in the room. Like, how are you going to sleep? That's high key lighting. That's kind of where high key lighting was utilized the most. So if you ever see any of those episodes, they're hilarious to watch because it's so bright. And it's supposed to be nighttime. And anyway, so same light setup. What would we use? So, key light. Which one's that? Which
Key
one?
light is still at 45 degrees left.
Yeah, that's still going to be your key. Backlight, its job purely to illuminate the backdrop. This is meant to fill in her left side, our right side here, and also add to the backdrop.
It's the bounce or indirect light.
Yep, that's indirect light. So for us, rectangle light, spotlight, disc light, and disc light. Could be a rectangle light too. I mean, that could work.
Yeah.
Again, does it really matter? Nope. As long as that shape is not defined, as long as you can't tell it's a rectangle. Whether it's a rectangle or a disc, they do the same thing. You just worry about, is it giving me a shape pattern that gives it away? All right, we're winding down. Right, traditional key and fill. So key, which side?
Back left side.
Yep, left side, 45 left. Positionally, where is it?
It's
Funny level.
I looking down.
It's right like high.
Well, that would be the highlight. So a little bit above level because of this shadow right here on the nose. We're back to getting that shadow that we did in the early Rembrandts. Right here. The difference is we've got a fill light to go with it. Now, same light, but they pull it back a little bit further, makes it softer, uses, it has less energy, so it kind of fills in the gaps. Right, next, exactly the same thing, but they call it a hair light. It's still a rim light. But it's aimed more on the side, not behind the ear. And that's what changes it from a rim light. The fact that it hits a broader area. And again, it's, it helps that the model, the subject has her head turned a little bit more, so you see a little more of the side of the head. All right, so anybody recognize this light setup?
Looks kind of like the Badger, but it's a little closer to the back.
Yep. It's Badger with, that's your key light right there in the front.
That's the key.
Yep, the one in the front. They're calling it a hard key because all it has on it is a honeycomb. And take a look at that shadow edge. Right here. So the Badger part is kind of illuminating the sides of the head, but this is where it's brightest. Right here. So slightly above also. Just enough. I mean, the nose, it's not quite perfectly parallel. It's a little bit up. So the nice thing about this contact sheet is it's really a contact sheet with all these different styles. You can pretty much pull out, oh yeah, the Badger, what did that look like before they added the key light? So that can give you kind of help for how that stuff should look. 99% of the time, or I should say 95% of the time, you're going to start with the key light. But it's always nice to know what happens when I add the other lights. Now, one of the things you're going to do before I get into that last image, the last couple one, one of the things you're going to do is the very first still life exercise, we're going to give you lighting breakdowns, which means here is a render of what this light does, the key light by itself. Then a render of what the fill light does by itself. And then another render of what the rim light or the backlight or whatever other light we have, lights we have, is doing. And then you'll get one with them all together. As you work on one light at a time. So you put your key light in first, you work with it. Now, the thing about today is you work in passes. Don't expect to nail each light 100% of the time. If you try to do that, you will never go to the second light or the third light. It'll be Sunday night and you'll still be working on the key light, because as artists, who here is not OCD about their work? Yeah, everybody is. So we are perfectionists. But what you do is you get it about 80-85% of the way, you stop. Put that light on the display layer, turn it off, work on the next light. Get it 80-85% of the way there. Stop. This is where discipline comes in. It's hard to walk away. It's like, I can't. Yeah, get up, walk away. Put it on a layer, turn it off, do it to the next light. Do the same thing. Then go back, do another run through. What it'll do is force you to work, keep going forward, and you'll come back with fresh eyes. Because a lot of times, you do something and you're not happy with it. You walk away from it, you go have a snack, you go to the bathroom, you go watch something else, do whatever you're going to do. Come back and you go, it's not as bad as I remember it. That's because you're absorbed in it in the moment, and we get tunnel vision. So you come back, you work on it a little bit more, you stop, you go to the next light. Do that for 2 or 3 passes, then turn all the lights on, turn visibility on all the layers, and compare it with the final render we give you. You'll be surprised that it'll probably be a lot closer than you think. If you work in passes, you will keep your sanity. Does that make sense? Take it from somebody who's banged their head on the wall long and enough times. And I go, what the hell am I doing? All right, so if you work in passes, you stand a chance of coming out the other end of the tunnel. All right, so for the last one, a lot of people like this. This is a challenge. This is like a 10-year-old birthday party with clowns. Where's the key light?
I think the key light is the one on the right.
Right.
No?
That's not on the left side, so it's not left side.
Bottom left of my memory.
Yeah, the 45 left.
Yep, that one. Now, that's the key. Where's the fill?
The red light.
Yep, the red light. Well, also helps too if you read here to tell you exactly what it is. But yes, this is the fill light. Right. Backlight. Blue. Yep. Blue backdrop. Perfect. Rim light.
Red, purple, purple.
Yeah, the purpley, pinkish, magenta light. And what is this doing? Yeah, it's like a fill. It has a double job. It's also helping to keep the red fill light off the left side of the face. And to keep the pink rim light from getting too far forward also. So it has kind of a double job. Yep, it's filling in some areas, but it's also keeping the other lights in check. So this one is pretty good if you want a challenge. Alright, so where do you start? Well, you start with the key light first. So where is the main shadow coming from? This is where it gets tricky. Because not only do we have a key light, but we've got a sort of fill reflector light in there.
It looks like most of the shadow is coming from the key and the fill light.
Yep.
So it's, since light is additive, the key light is working with the reflector, and it's adding onto, I guess, where the shadows, there's a middle ground where the shadows are coming from?
Yeah. Kind of like, you can sort of see there's like multiple shadows here that are kind of meeting, and they're
Yeah.
kind of muddying the waters from each other. So if you take a look at the eye, it sort of looks like you've got this light is a little above, which helps. And you've also got the reflector, which is probably a little above also. Kind of shining down. So these two shadows are kind of mixing here. Something else that may help you too is that kind of V shadow under the chin here. That's telling you, okay, well, this is probably coming from the key light. Those hot spots on the nose, on the chin. So that's going to cause this little bit of shadow. Then you've got the fill or the reflector coming in this way. But if you like color, that's the one for you. All right, questions about anything we went over? So this all relates to today's exercise. All right, questions? It's a good time to take a break. When we come back from break, we'll do some demos. I'm going to show you guys about the light linking, because you're going to need that. And I'll also kind of go through the exercises and show you guys how to kind of approach the still life portion. I recommend you do the still life before you take a crack at this, because it's good to have individual reference for each light before you start trying to pilot this thing, or any one of them with multiple lights.